Sup, sluts? So, I got the house to myself. So, I have been moving some stuff down here. But, you know, it's fine down here. It's just not... like, the bedroom is like a... my bedroom is like a shrine to... sacred geometry and Alex Gray's work and stuff like that. The tool shrine. Just call a spade what it's called, and that's a tool shrine. But people get caught up on like okay. Here's something funny. I was talking about the perfect circle letters with somebody in I think it was Facebook. This is a few months ago, but I was writing a copy of the Book of the Law during winter instead of spring. I don't know. I couldn't wait, I guess. So I get to the part where it talks about writing it, finding new letters and value for the English language, and writing the Book of the Law and pasting the sheets from right to left off the bottom, and behold, blah blah blah. So what I was saying to somebody in this Thelema group who studies the Book of the Law, I guess, as like a thing, these are Thelemites, so their religion is the Book of the Law and supplementary shit. So I was talking to them and offered this idea that I've had for years, but I've just never... See, there's a couple things that are preventing me from doing it. But just the idea in general is... and anyway, I'm sorry, I thought of something. But the idea in general is you take the perfect circle letters and you use them. I mean, there is... an account of Billy about coming up with the letters, and as far as I can tell, it was inspiration. Like, he was inspired. He did them really quick. It wasn't like a lot of thought put into them, which is perfect because it's an act of pure will without purpose. He didn't create them to write into the Book of the Law or to do anything else really other than the album Mer de Noms. They were just doing artwork for the album, for the band, whatever, man. See, this is what got me thinking about... Alex Gray had mentioned he wanted to paint The Great Turn, but he didn't have a project for it. As in, Alex Gray doesn't paint what he wants to. He does shit because he puts the most effort into things that help bring back to the chapel as a whole. So he has ideas that he's not working on because he's dedicated to something else. Like the idea of him wanting secret backers, you fucking hit us up. I'll tell you right now. If we have to wait for another fucking Tool album for something like that. Ugh. But it was perfect. Anyway, because The Great Turn, okay, one second. This, oh, I forgot parts of it. This is the same thing. Yeah, no, it's not though. Okay. 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. Okay. Sorry. So Malkuth, this is Malkuth, right? But this is actually positioned more where the fruit of Yesod would be. Malkuth actually goes way, it would be way down over here on the floor. But in the original, the way I had my original tree, this with the pattern of the four worlds with the four concentric circles, it had a Clippeth tree, which is a shadow tree. So just imagine, I didn't have the Clippeth extended, of course. It's just the 10. Hey, Raziel, hold this. So what you get is a tree and an inverted tree. One mirroring the other. The actual tree just has negative components within the Sephiroth itself, but the way that the Clippeth is represented is for a different kind of path working. The idea of descending into Malkuth to deal with what Malkuth brings about. I actually watched a video on Dark Souls. There's like a lot of video games I don't play, but I watched it. Okay, here's what I realized. Trying to figure out what I am, as in, do what you are, do what you love, you'll make money. That's how you make money. And other than tending a garden that I don't own, I don't actually know, it's hard for me to place it. Besides storytelling and more so studying stories in general, the story. Because everything, every piece of media, everywhere, always, even things that weren't created are a part of the story being told. There is a structure that people are using that is universal. And you manipulate that structure with placing the archetypes in different positions and giving them qualities of each other to change the story. So black and white becomes gray, and the gray battles one another or makes peace. These stories are universal. What is the reason for that? Why are we telling ourselves stories like this over and over again? And it's like everything else, multifaceted, multi-layered. It isn't a reason. But do with that well isn't a thing you do. It is what you are, what we are. And instead of telling stories, we've gotten to the part where we are the story and we're in a feedback loop. That's what social media is. You are put in a feedback that you're waiting for the next part of the story to happen for you to comment on and thus interject yourself into the story. It's the classic writer putting himself into the story and muddying the meta of the whole thing. Because once the author is in the story, the implications of that, like deciphering the story, then becomes even more multi-layered. What does that have to do with anything? Well, the God idea, the idea God of God, is the character putting itself in a story to experience being something in a story. That sounds silly, or it sounds like something people say a lot. But what you are experiencing is a resonant field of experience. There is a thing created. You are projecting your consciousness, we are projecting our consciousness into the object. Like, I'm a person right now. But you're not a person. You are a mind. The mind is a resonating field. The circles in the pattern represent individual minds. The individual minds are connected by being similar. In the spirit world, nothing is separated by space and time. It's separated by likeness and difference. Cleanliness is close to godliness, is a term you hear, because putrefaction and decay isn't. These are different aspects of God, but it isn't. The experience is different. So imagine a book. Everybody has this idea of beginning and end, but that's not how the book is set up. There is a process happening from the left, there is a process happening from the right, and depending on how you read the story, it peaks in the middle and then goes to either way. So if you look at it from one position, it seems to grow, bloom, decay. From another position, the decay seems to give rise to something that blooms and then goes back into itself. That leads to it. The book, when it ends or begins on any other end, folds around. Like you can fold the book. When you open a book the whole way up, it's face to face. Okay. Cover to cover, right? The middle is the thing that is pushed out when that happens. In the told book, lit for Firenoculum, the center of the book is the great turn. So looking from the outside in, things that experience reality will experience becoming one with the light, or they will experience themselves cleaving to clippeth and being shattered by the light. The light transmission that comes is emotion, thought, and every other force that is applied to living creatures. Nature exists without conscious observation. We're here within this vision crystallized vision, matter. You're tuning in to a vessel that is within the structure. Fuck. The advent of the ideas that your mind bring into the reality causes change. The same way a gardener changes a yard. So my yard before I got here was just grass. There's actually garbage. There's a lot of garbage out there because like a lot of places in town, there were just landfills everywhere, and glass doesn't decompose. Whatever. What does that mean? Well, our consciousness alters Earth. Like what we're doing to Earth. Okay, think of this. For millions of years, there were human beings on the world that did not alter the face of the Earth. At a certain point in time, something changed. we started building buildings around farms. These farms became centers of civilization that needed protecting. So even bigger buildings were created out of necessity. The work of growing as a community and having families within these new environments pushed innovation in tool making and like everything, recreational stuff like music and art also, because with the ability to have downtime, as in not survival, you're not an animal worrying about being eaten, things like the syntax in language begin to develop so that you're not just saying a thing, you're talking about the idea of a thing in different parts of space and time. So concepts that so they were engaging in concepts that they weren't before, as in different Sephiroth of the tree were being activated. There is a lot of evidence that suggests this is because of entheogens were introduced into the diet over millions of years. Certain tribes gained almost a holy reverence to the their given entheogen, and they formed relationships with them. So like a tribe didn't learn everything by studying things scientifically through a microscope. They learned things by ingesting the plant and then listening to what it had to say. And anybody that's ever had a trip in nature, you can almost begin to see by the way they radiate light what plants would hurt you if you ate them and which plants would kill you if you ate them. As in, the entheogen gives you an extra ability to avoid being poisoned by its cousins. You know, it gives you the information it has. Fungus do this a lot with plants in the forest, and they actually give each other nutrients. Like the idea of a mother tree in a forest that has a kingdom of mycelia underneath is pretty common. There's a silver bug. Kitties, we got bugs. Anyway, the idea of alien consciousness coming to Earth isn't a new concept. Human beings are unstable hybrids of what will be considered an alien, something completely separated from the planet, or human beings, which we know we've come from the planet, yet we seem to be in some sort of disharmonic stage with it. And this is our big issue, I think, is that whatever deity the majority of humanity is falling in line with, they're viewing the earth as not the home, their home. They view it as a prison. And I've been talking a lot about this. That's why there's alpha males and all this shit. Hey, when the fuck did this happen? 2 years ago. He didn't even know. Anyway, this is all a preamble ramble to say that Okay, the body of light. Okay, so they came up in the chapel, um, full moon meetings, but the whole time we're talking about that, I keep going back to, like, this is how I see the body of light. Not how I see it around myself. It's how in my head when I try to conceptualize the different, and not even this. Like the reason this is concentric circles. Oh, did I have it? Is concentric circles is because that's what your body of light actually looks like. You get through all this physical, mental, and emotional shit to gain access to this, which is your true body of light. Ruach and Neshama are around here, but it. Oh, and that's the other thing. Raziel. The reason the sword in Legacy of Cain and it being tied to Raziel, like Raziel's spirit is inside of it, that represents Raziel is the Neshama. Raziel is the body of light. Cain is the body. So in the first Blood Omen, Cain is turned into a vampire after being murdered. He's murdered to be turned into a vampire. The reason for this is that he's the balance guardian for the pillar, for a pillar called balance. There's 9 of them. These 9 pillars serve as a lock and a bind to keep out a race of beings called the Hilden that were banished in an ancient war with the Hilden versus the ancient winged race. This war was a holy war that was started over the wheel of fate. There is a deity, a Cthulhu, or a Lovecraftian like creature called the Elder God, who has this position in reality that when a soul dies, he cleanses their soul, devouring their memories, emotional trauma, everything, their body of light, and then spitting them back out onto the wheel. They live a life, build up what they can, they die. He devours their light, spits them back out onto the wheel. Always without memory of their previous lives. The winged race worship the Elder God. And because of this, the Elder God, one of the pillar principles is mind. So the Elder God has the ability to enter the mind of any living creature, and you can hear him as a voice, like Mr. Gold in Revolver, like the ego, kind of, but not a personal ego. This is he was a voice that calmed them and made them not afraid of death. And because they worshipped him, he allowed them to study prophecy and build their civilization to like unimaginable degree. Because they submitted to the wheel, they were able to do incredible things. And because they knew that death wasn't the end, they didn't fear it, and they created a system where you would knowingly be born back into certain places. Like your position was always well off. There wasn't a karma condition where some of them were worse off than others. Their society was fucking pristine. The Hilden were, from what I can tell, technologically based more so than the winged race. And because of this, they stumbled across genetic engineering that led to them being able to prolong their lives, practically indefinitely. So they became a race of immortals. And after a few hundred years of this, the Elder God grew angry and he began a war. The Hilden banished, they cursed the vampires, the winged race, making them vampires. The sterility and bloodlust made it so. No. The sterility and immortality. Bloodlust was a manageable curse because there were still humans to feed on. But their sterility and their immortality made it so they could not re-enter a cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The pillars were created during the war. So when they were cursed and they banished them, they were now bound to the pillars also. So there's 9 winged people bound to the pillars. And the pillars would sustain you whether you were a vampire or not. But over time, the silence of not having their god comfort them, all but one of the winged race went insane. The only one who didn't went insane and killed themselves. The only one who didn't was Janos Aldrin, and he was the 10th secret, hidden because there's not 10 pillars, but there is the Reaver. The Reaver acts as a key. So the Neshama acts as a key to the bind that banished the Hilden. The reason, the time travel aspect of the whole story reveals what the Neshama is all about. And that is a transcended part of you from time and space. Your Nefesh, your intelligence, your Ruach, and then your Neshama all intertwine, weave together. One builds one to the next. Like your body. Like your physical body has layers. Well, your physical body is only an aspect of your body. This is why meditating and all that is important, because most of society has you strapped in to the flesh. It's presented in the Legacy of Kain game that with the sword, with 2 swords within proximity of each other, things can be altered in time. It was some sort of loophole. It's basically how the whole game is based around. But that idea of Neshama meeting Neshama is an implication of will, because the sword is an inanimate object. It's not as though it chooses Cain or William. But because Raziel is conscious within the sword, and he's risen from his death as a human by Cain, turned into a vampire, killed by Cain, thrown into the abyss, rises thrice born as a wraith or a remnant, and then imprisoned into the sword as the Reaver. I mean, it's essentially not just thrice born. His final stage is Cain. Like, he enters the sword, part of him, and the other part he puts within Cain and heals the corruption. Okay. I'm saying it. I think I'm going to do a series where I just go through the whole game and we just sit here and talk about it. I sit here and talk about it. I guess you can't talk back, unfortunately.
UFC 264 is streaming
So,
exclusively on ESPN Plus. The main event is Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor 3. Who you got? Subscribe to ESPN Plus and buy UFC 264.
no. I don't want to know. Nope. Want it.
There is a magical operation of maximum importance. The initiation of a new aeon. When it becomes necessary to utter a word, the whole
Abracadabra.
must be bathed in blood.
So this is the infiltration of the circle. This is Vorador, who was created by Janos Aldrin and who forged the Reaver. This is actually the same time period as the end of Soul Reaver 2. Right now, Raziel is talking to Mobius and Malik is protecting Mobius. That's why he doesn't come when they call. The fact that he kills these members means that Ariel and not Nebuchadnezzar, Nupraptor and the others are brought into the circle. They're born as circle guardians. This is part of Mobius's plan to allow him to infiltrate the circle and kill them. Malik is bound to armor. This is very similar to Raziel being bound to the sword. And I'm interested that people don't talk about it more. But the vampire is bound to flesh, and they must consume. He's bound to armor. He doesn't feed on anything anymore. He is strictly Nephish Behemoth, the bestial soul bound to an armor. This is Ariel, the new balance guardian. She's murdered, and Nupraptor goes crazy. Him going crazy infects the circle with madness. Cain was born during that corruption period. When everything cracked and went black, that was when this guy, Cain, was being born. He's explaining to him that he's a nobleman and he deserves a treat, or a drink, or a bed. These are agents of Morpheus, the Death Guardian Pillar, who has been an agent of change for the Hilden for thousands of years. He helped Mobius overthrow the Circle, or the ancient vampires, and got humans in control of the Pillars. Ve Victus. Woe to the conquered.
Now I was the one suffering. Not anything as pedestrian as physical pain, rather the cruel, jammed, impotent anger. The hunger for revenge. I didn't care if I was in heaven or hell. All I wanted was to kill my assassin. Sometimes you get confused. The necromancer Mortanius offered me a chance for vengeance, and like a fool, I jumped at his offer without considering the cost. Nothing is free.
It's interesting that he's presented a sword here, but what's actually happening is the heart of darkness is being put inside of Cain. The heart of darkness is a relic the Seraphim gained by killing Janos Aldrin. Raziel, as a human, actually, kills Janos, and they keep the heart until Morpheus uses it to raise Cain to set prophecy in motion. Whoa.
The world had changed to my eyes. I had not expected such cruelty from the light. For in the embrace of this
Throughout the first Legacy of Cain, okay, let's see what
I seek only a cure.
There is no cure for death, only release. You must destroy the sorcery that is now poisoning Nosgoth. Only then will you realize peace. The 9 of the Protectors of Hope were sworn to use their powers to preserve our world. Now these pillars have been corrupted by a traitor. My murder at the hands of this beast drove my love Leprapto mad. Now he spreads misery and pain among the circle.
So my eyes shut.
You must restore balance. You must right the pillars of Nosgoth.
I care not for the fate of this world.
Then for yourself, Cain. Beware the unspoken.
Beware the unspoken. The unspoken in the game is the Hilden.
Each circle member was bonded to the pillar he served. The pillars reflected the mental state of their servants, and as the minds of the circle degenerated and descended farther into dementia, the pillars crumbled. To restore them, each member of the circle had to die, and the artifact that served as their link to the pillar had to be returned. Only when all the pillars were restored did Ariel claim my curse would end. And so, my hunt for Naprapta began.
Okay, so Ariel sets him on the task of killing the Pillar Guardians, who are all corrupted, so that new Pillar Guardians may be born and Nosgoth can be restored. Cain, at this point, is unaware that he is the Balance Guardian. What I was about to say was most of the game is Cain
From the depths of the retreats
is Cain gaining armor, because again Cain is the physical, the body.
sockets, I viewed Nosgoth in a different fashion. The glass seemed to warp the image and taint the color.
It says it's warping and tainting the color, but if you notice, this looks exactly like the Empire Cain. When Cain rules Nosgoth, it actually looks like that. And a lot of people think it's because Cain refused to sacrifice, and it is because of that. But it's because the Hilden are technically in control. And as much as Cain is a vampire, and as much as Raziel is a vampire, they have Hilden aspects within them. That's kind of what the corruption is their influence. And Raziel is kind of their champion in the sense that he's one of their spirits within our world.
Perhaps the head of her beloved will convince Ariel that I have accomplished my task. I placed Naprapta's head before the pillar of the mind and watched on as it dissolved into the stone. The pillar accepted.
So it's interesting that he brings the head and it dissolves into the stone. It kind of is alluding to the necrophagus cults that would consume the sleeper. What is it? The glittering sleeper dream of the sleeper. There's this elusive, hidden throughout time and whatever chemical component of a pharaoh or priest king that they say that the Great Pyramid was built to extract from people, much like a DMT extraction thing. Anyway, Cain collects heads, puts them on the pillar, restoring each pillar until he comes across the what's it called?
I recognize this crest from my youth. It is the sigil of the mighty lion of Willendorf, bloodstained and rusted upon this battered shield.
Oh, Mobius, who's
A nobleman,
hiding
seeking
himself
wisdom.
as
Death has taught you well.
this guy.
Enough philosophy. I seek answers.
Answers indeed. I have them all if you have the questions. And what are the questions for these answers? King Akmar, the only hope to defeat the legions of the Nemesis.
See, this is what I feel
King
like they
Akmar,
can fix
paralyzed
Legacy of Cain
by his
2
princes
by having
and
this be the
they.
battle
King
Cain
Akmar,
fights
the
in,
useless.
or
Pray,
when
good
he goes
sir,
back in time and
what
fights
are the questions?
William,
A box of
the Nemesis.
tricks and babble, old man.
That's
Answer
where
me this. Who is
the
man,
Hilden
and how
are
can I defeat
hiding.
him?
And I know
All
it's
in
smudging with
time.
timeline, but the way they smudged it, it's a little bit
Yes,
harder
time.
to swallow.
Unless you master it, it will master you. And now it's time for your answer. Malik, defender of...
So what happens is Cain is told to go through time and fight this guy to set right what he sees as wrong.
Yes, to concern ourselves with.
Yeah, okay. So this is Mordor telling Cain about his triumph over the circle.
6 of the sheep. I defeated their pathetic wooden shepherd.
But what he's telling him about this for
Since then, our kind has not bothered
is to avoid being in the affairs of human life.
And I suggest you do the same.
Cain does not listen, and he goes through time and fights the guy. And when he comes back, he's greeted to this.
Would you stand idle as vermin destroy your crops? No! As your house burns? No! Will you allow this evil to continue? No! Will the wickedness end? Yes! Do you believe? Yes! Then take me to your king so that I can prepare you for the onslaught.
They are finishing the genocide of all vampires. The reason they were able to start this is because Cain killed their king,
Yes.
who became the Nemesis, but had yet to be the Nemesis.
A tiny streaming device. Strange. When coincidence seems too convenient, I prefer to call it fate.
Yeah, Cain is definitely a fatalist, which puts him in line with the Elder God more than Raziel. But it's because he seems to understand reality and doesn't question the cycle. He doesn't even try to think beyond it. He, like, when he's killing somebody, his whole Victus thing is that it's their destiny to be killed by him.
The carnage from battle was gone. Yet there was
Oh.
Something amiss. From a distance, I heard cries, and a breeze from the south carried with it the faint odor of vampire blood. 'Twould seem the folly fell upon my own shoulders. With their sainted King William dead by my hand, the people of the land were consumed by a hunger all their own.
And so they started a genocide against the vampires. When you play as Raziel in Soul Reaver 2, you run through this era. There's a series of 500 years that happen, and these every 500 years, Raziel and Cain, Elder Cain, overlap in the timeline.
Would you spare one wolf in the pack that has devastated your herd? No! And let us destroy them all! He is the last! Destroy him! The people will not rest until Nosgoth is...
And there's an interesting thing too. Cain in the first game can transform into a werewolf. So vampires and werewolves are shown to be same creature, as in a vampire can transform into a werewolf, depending on the vampire. Different vampires have different abilities, which is kind of explored in Blood Omen 2, but it's like Blood Omen 2 should not have been, honestly. It shouldn't have been made by a separate team. I don't know. Anyway, we get this great ending where it's unclear that if Mobius stays dead here. It seems that he's allowed to die to set the pillar right, but that the Elder God brings him back, at least as a specter, if he doesn't devour his body completely. Because Raziel sees him in the future. I don't know. It's an interesting topic that Mobius remains like Ariel, but hidden from Raziel. But because of defiance, that actually doesn't happen.
Well done, Cain. Mobius did so love playing the trickster's part. His guise as the Oracle served his schemes well. Pity with all his plots he failed to plan for you. Come to me, my undead son. Make haste to the pillars. The stage is set for the grand finale.
Right.
It exists for us. We don't exist for it. Our powers will save or damn Nosgoth at our whim. Stand with us, Watanius, or die.
Then I shall die.
Yeah, it's interesting that the final Guardian isn't killed by Cain here. Mobius actually kills him. And I'm not sure which guy that is. I would have to rewatch the list, because I had a list of who dies in what order and their names and the meaning of their names, because it actually is pretty interesting. But the video where I go through the whole series, that's kind of what I want to do. So Cain kills him, and then the Hilden that possesses him come, and Cain kills that demon also. And at the end of the game, you're left with the choice. After learning the truth.
Pillar, the only survivor of the Circle of Nine. At my whim, the world will be healed or damned. At my whim.
Cain chooses. Would you kill yourself to save the world?
Once I embraced my powers,
Knowing you were the last of a species.
we are gods. Dark gods. And it is our duty to thin the herd.
So Cain, in all his corruption, chooses to let the pillars fall. And he builds an empire around the fallen pillars. Cain is deified.
The clans tell tales of him. Few know the truth. He was mortal once,
As were we
as
all.
were we all. However, his contempt for humanity drove him to create me and my brethren. I am Raziel, firstborn of his lieutenants. I stood with Cain and my brethren at the dawn of the Empire. I have served him a millennium. Over time,
See this look on Cain's face? Cain has access to the chronoplasm chambers, Mobius's chambers, the time streamer. He has access to all his chambers within Nosgoth because he's king of Nosgoth. So Cain knows the future. First time around, when this happened, he witnesses him. What he sees is himself get jealous of Raziel and rip his wings off. This is not Cain being jealous in this scene. This is Cain knowing that if he doesn't do this, that future events, specifically Soul Reaver 2, will not happen. Just to give you clarity.
he became less human and more divine. Cain would enter the state of change and emerge with a new gift. Some years after Master, our evolution would follow, until I had the honor of surpassing my lord.
Raziel being Neshama, his gift is transcending the limitations. And he does this by gaining wings. Each of Cain's sons do this type of transcending certain things. This just happens to be Raziel's particular ability, which came from Cain raising him. It's Cain's blood in him.
My transgression.
But just as Cain turning into a vampire or werewolf was his thing, Raziel has particular gifts.
There was only one possible outcome.
If you look at Cain's face here too, you can notice he's not happy about what's happening. In fact, he's been waiting 1,500 years, or 1,000 years for this to happen.
Burn forever in the bowels of the lake of the dead. Cast him in. Tumbling, burning with white-hot fire, I plunged into the depths of the abyss. Unspeakable pain, relentless agony. Time ceased to exist. Only this torture and a deepening hatred of the hypocrisy that damned me to this hell.
So this is the Neshama literally going to the bottom of the abyss.
An eternity passed.
Not just the physical world, but the bottom of the spiritual world, the spectral plane. Now the Neshama rises in the spectral plane as a remnant, not as a physical being, but yet itself. You are worthy. The secret of God, Raziel, means secret of God. The secret of God. So what it's saying there is the secret of God is you are worthy. That's how the first Soul Reaver opens up. That whole cinematic. With you at bottom. Thrown into a lake of fire by your physical body, aka Cain in the story. So your being, your body, is so low that the spirit, your neshama, experiences it as the depths of the abyss. That's where it is. At the beginning. It's hard to explain.
I know you, Raziel. You are worthy.
What madness is this? What pitiful form is this that I have come to inhabit? Death would be a release next to this travesty.
Travis, what?
You did not survive the abyss, Raziel. I have only spared you from total dissolution.
See, he says he spared him from dissolution, but it's hard to tell if the Elder resurrects him or if he would have always resurrected there.
I am destroyed.
You
You
are reborn.
are reborn.
The breath of one of Cain's abominations traps the essence of life. It is this soul that animates the corpse you...
So the idea of a vampire is an idea of a being without a neshama. And it lives in a fragile body.
The dead remain trapped. I cannot spin them in the wheel of fate. They cannot complete their destinies.
And it seems creatures do this to achieve some sort of nirvana state. And that they fear death and that they view it as they'll lose their memory and ability to the Elder God. So that becoming a vampire is preferable to death.
To reave their souls. I can make it possible. Become my soul reaver. My angel of death.
So basically the beginning of the game is you ascending from the bottom towards the top.
You must feed.
The old hunger has left me. I have no desire for blood.
You are changed. Your bloodthirst is replaced by a deeper need. You have become a devourer of souls. To sustain your strength, you must hunt the lost
Life
spirits of the
feeds
underworld
on
and
life.
consume
So
the
Cain
souls of
still
your
exists
enemies.
as killing something and devouring its blood.
These portals
Raziel
are the conduit between the
is at a point
spectral
where
and
he
material
doesn't
realms.
kill
With
something.
their aid, you may
He
gather
devours its
and will
soul.
yourself to
I mean, you
become
kill it,
manifest in the
but you're not
physical
eating its
world.
blood. He's
This
eating
is
the
taxing,
light
however. Your
from
strength
him.
must first be fully restored.
So
You require no
it's not that
conflict to
it's
return to this
the
place.
sustenance of the
You
meat
may abandon
that keeps
your
him
physical
alive.
body at
It's
any
the
time.
light that animates the body that sustains neshama.
Sustain your strength.
So you
Prolong
only
your
need,
manifestation in the physical world.
so you don't have,
If you
that's why
fail to feed
there's the
or
vegetarian.
absorb too many wounds, this fragile matter will dissolve.
What are
So there's
these
these blood drinking cults, and then there's these complete
They are
vegetarian
the children of your
cults.
brother, Uma.
And each of them are feeding
That's impossible.
different aspect of their
These
body.
wild, scuttling beasts could not be kin of our high blood.
Do you suppose that time stood still?
But it's
for
always
you,
through
Raziel? Much has
the
changed
nefesh,
since you passed from the world of men.
even breathing prana.
I knew my opponent's weaknesses, having suffered
These are
them
physical
myself. Physical
actions.
wounds are fleeting. Vampire's immortal flesh begins to close as soon as it is cleaved. Vampires need only fear those wounds that...
See, that's in the game, that's how it's described as near immortal. But in real world, it would be complete opposite of that. A vampire would be fragile.
The fate of this world was preordained in an instant.
See, Cain